The Kingdom of Dreams and Madness is a truly powerful and immersive documentary that I would recommend to any serious Studio Ghibli fan. That does not mean it is an easy watch. It is certainly not a light, fluffy survey of the company and its history and all its triumphs, which they very easily could have done, and that audiences both inside Japan and outside it would have eaten up ravenously. No, the film does more than that. It tells a story, a serious story of attempting to find relevance in a increasingly atomized and increasingly disconnected world. So enthralled to profiteering and accumulation that any larger sense of purpose has been lost, and to try to think about what function art serves if it can discuss that process, if it can discuss that alienation, that disconnection of people from each other, and from any sense of purpose outside a monetary, accumulative one, and yet it can't stop it. The Kingdom of Dreams and Madness is not merely a survey of Ghibli as a studio. It does talk about the history of the company, how it was founded, and it's quite detailed in that regard, but it is particularly focused on a late period of the studio's history, where for the final time both Miyazaki and his co-founder Isao Takahata were working on films. They were working on different films. Miyazaki was working on The Wind Rises, supposed to be his final film, although he unretired yet again and completed a later masterwork, The Boy and the Heron, or How Do You Live, that emphasizes a lot of the same ideas in The Wind Rises, but in a more overt way. Takahata made The Tale of the Princess Kaguya, based on an animated interpretation of an old Japanese folk legend. Takahata was a few years older than Miyazaki. And as such, Takahata, as Miyazaki discusses, remembers the end of the war, whereas Miyazaki was a bit too young to have any serious memory of the conflict, although certain images still stand out in his mind from that. And certainly the specter of World War II, the imperialist war waged by Japan on the world, resulting in the death of millions of people and the final humiliation of that imperialist force via the devastating American bombing of the nation in 1945. Miyazaki, who does quite a lot of talking during this documentary, sees himself as kind of removed from the mainstream of Japan and even Japanese animation, even though he exerted so much influence on Japanese animation. He is still someone whose political, philosophical conscience about the world is shaped by the war and the shame of Imperial Japan in multiple senses of that term. The shame of defeat, but also the shame of acting so immorally in the first place, so destructively. And I think it is impossible to overstate the importance of that background, that context on him and Takahata and how they think about the world. The younger generation simply does not have that. And as such, in Miyazaki's perspective, it's pretty clear in this film. They are a bit shallow, a bit disconnected, and mindlessly consumerist. They don't fully understand the world outside their immediate sensory pleasures. They want shortcuts and have no understanding of real, genuine hardship. Now, from a lesser person, this could seem just like the old man shaking his fist at the clouds, yelling about kids these days. And certainly there is a bit of old man grouchiness to it. But his points are good and valid. Like, Miyazaki fundamentally comes across in this film as basically what you could discern if you've been a careful viewer of his work, of his art. He is someone who has a deep connection to the natural environment. There's a deep connection to this kind of unpretentious, unpreachy kind of Japanese animistic Buddhist Shinto spirituality. He is someone who is not necessarily anti-technology and has a great respect for groups of people coming together to create things in a way that I think any animation director, any director of any group of people has that innate appreciation. But at the same time, he is deeply skeptical of a kind of shallowness in people. His opinion of humanity as a whole and of modern generations in particular is not very high. He sees people as enthralled to the mindless pursuit of pleasure, of efficiency, of trying to do things as easily, cleanly, bloodlessly as possible. And as such, they live lives that are fundamentally kind of good, but they lack a true sense of human pathos, of the strivings of people. This is Miyazaki's problem with much of the anime industry as a whole. He is critical of the United States, but he's also very critical of his own country, just for this kind of blithe reliance on flash, on pure sensory action, while throwing away a lot of the deeper humanity, a lot of the closer connectivity between people, and just the everyday honor and nobility of people doing something that they care about and putting a lot of effort into being good at it and doing it well. Miyazaki approaches what he thinks might be his last film, Kazetachinu, The Wind Rises, as something of a tragedy. He deeply cares about this film, he puts a lot of effort into it, and we see a lot of inside details into the making of that film. But it's framed in the context of, oh, Takahata and I are getting much older. There's not a lot of time for us. And what will happen to Studio Ghibli after we're gone? We've done all these works of art that have received acclaim, but what does that matter? The world, if anything, seems gloomier and dour now. Environmental destruction, social atomization and disconnection, grasping profiteering and materialism, all these things that Miyazaki rails against in his art are still there, and he knows it. And there's a kind of pessimism to Miyazaki. Or I wouldn't say he's nihilistic, but I would say Much of this film is him trying to fight against the impulse to be nihilistic and find the desire to still believe in art, still believe in the desire to make beautiful things and try to bring a sense of meaning and purpose to the world. He reminds me a little of John Ruskin, the Victorian writer and essayist, who greatly railed against mass production, the mechanization of society, the breaking up of any communal connection, of any sense of people to their history, to each other, to their own individual artistry and creativity in this increasingly mechanistic and sterile world. Ruskin, faced with these problems, wrote quite beautifully against them, wrote lovely essays talking about the importance of handicrafts, the importance of making things organically in the sense of having a relation to other people and to a larger sense of culture, not simply relying on this impulse to follow trends, to make things as efficiently and mechanistically as possible, or simply chase profit margins and turn all of human society into a game of supply and demand, of profit and loss. The connection of people to their labor was incredibly important to Ruskin. It is a kind of expression that for Ruskin belongs to everyone, and it is the glue that connects communities of people together, and that is being lost in a world devoted to mindless consumerism. Ruskin wrote about this for many decades, and he was very successful. By the end of the Victorian age, he was one of the premier intellectuals. His name was quite popular. And he's still quite known in Britain even today, and yet what he was trying to fix only got worse. His ambitions to solve the problems of an increasingly commercialistic and mechanized world did not succeed, and as a result he grew increasingly dour and retreated into his country estate at Brantwood in the Lake District. I have been to Brantwood, as a note. I walked 20 miles to get there. And Miyazaki faces a similar conundrum. He is both extremely successful in many regards, one of the greatest animation minds in the history of the world, and yet this larger sense of dehumanizing malaise, of people being disconnected from each other, and to any sincere, serious sense of labor and work by this cold, impersonal, sterile modern society that provides efficiency, but at the cost of human vitality and connection. These problems only got worse. So what do you do if you're an artist? Miyazaki doesn't know, and I think that's an important point of emphasis. Disney, in his older, suffered the commercial defeat of a lot of his great ambitions in the early to mid-1940s and kind of retreated into capitalistic excess and middlebrow schlock for the rest of his life. Miyazaki, if anything, take the opposite approach. He makes increasingly difficult and strange art. The Wind Rises and The Boy and the Heron are difficult films compared to many of the others he made, in just trying to justify the value of making art in a broken world. That is how Miyazaki views The Wind Rises. I think that's clear from watching The Wind Rises, but it's especially clear from looking at this film, The Kingdom of Dreams and Madness, and how Miyazaki is reflecting on the twilight years of Studio Ghibli. And that's explicitly in the subject matter of these films. How do you create? What's the value of trying to use your imagination and try to create value and order and coherence when the world inevitably corrupts you to an extent, because that world is purely devoted to profit, to efficiency, to mindless pleasure, and the things that you create are ultimately extremely prioritized and beloved by people who have very different values from you. That's kind of the case with Jiro, who creates this beautiful plane for people who have no real care for airplanes as art and only want to use them to destroy things, and for Miyazaki, who deeply loves animation as a humanistic art form and finds that much of the direction that animation has gone for him, in his perspective, both in Japan and the West, is increasingly glossy, sensationalist, and kind of empty, fitting in what he views as an empty world. Now, I wouldn't say this is a gloomy film or a miserable film. It's not, but it's a very poignant film and a very beautiful one. If you want a really thoughtful look into late period Miyazaki and to the history of Studio Ghibli as a whole, I highly recommend this film. I watched it a long time ago, around 2018-ish, and I recently watched it again, and it's still as beautiful and as wistfully affecting as ever. So thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can, and you want to see more videos like this one before anyone else. If you've seen this documentary, what do you think of it? I want to hear your thoughts. Sound off in the comments. It is one I think that every Studio Ghibli fan should watch. Take care, everyone. Adios, comrades.